Hello, everyone, and welcome into episode 131 of the Stomp the Bus Show. I am your host, Mark Harris, coming at you solo for this shorter episode. Not going to be too much on here, but some interesting stuff to touch on. Please like and subscribe on YouTube. Please rate and review on your podcast platform of choice. And as always, remember to follow the College Huddle podcast network. All right, so we are entering the end of July, which means that ASU football training camp is right around the corner. And on paper, things are in a really good spot. We survived both transfer portals without losing anyone of real note, save for some backups. We are getting good reviews, or not reviews, but just Sam Leavitt and Jordan Tyson are getting high praise in the offseason. Tyson is regarded by a lot of outlets to be wide receiver number one in this upcoming draft, and a lot of people think that Leavitt can be a first-round quarterback in the 2026 NFL draft. You return 4 or 5 offensive linemen. You return a great group of tight ends. You return all but one, maybe 2 starters on defense, depending on how you sort it out. A defense that was pretty good last year. So there's a lot of things on paper that are pointing in a positive direction, right? We leave Big 12 media days 2 weeks ago, and obviously there's no poll, but the kind of general thought of what the Big 12 is going to be is that ASU is probably in the top 3, right? Very few people have them outside of the top 3. And there's just a lot of good positive momentum entering this year. And that's why the 2025 football season for Arizona State is incredibly important. Because in this world of college football, we have no idea what the roster will look like a year from now, 8 months from now, right, in the winter. No idea. Because there's a lot of guys who are either in their last year of eligibility, or in the case of Jordan Tyson, maybe a Xavier Alford, and obviously Leavitt, like they have opportunities to go to the NFL draft. And so it needs to be just noted, and it's just incredibly important that ASU takes advantage of the roster that it has this year, because 2026 we have no idea. It could be a transfer quarterback. Maybe it's Leavitt returns, but if Leavitt returns, that means that things probably didn't go as well as they could have in 25. So you probably want Leavitt to leave and go in the NFL draft, because that means that he played well and likely ASU wins a lot of games. So it's just, we don't know when ASU is going to have a collection of players like this again. It could be next year, right? Who knows? Maybe they attack the portal really well. There's a chance that some of these younger guys that aren't going to get a ton of playing time this year elevate their game and become really good players next year. But who knows, right? So that's why this upcoming season is incredibly important. And in a lot of the previews about ASU, a theme that is present in a lot of analysis is, ASU's, they've had one-off seasons before, so how do we know if they'll be able to continue it? In an ESPN write-up probably a week and a half, it was previewing all the top 25 teams, and something that could derail them. And the thing they had for ASU was just regression, which I found interesting, because it's like, you don't have actual concrete, like what you're pointing to is like, oh, well, the program history says this. And it's like, I get that, but I would like some more concrete details of why this season could be bad, but whatever. It's their analysis. So, I guess what I'm leading to is like this year is incredibly critical in ASU shaking off well, they're just ASU type of deal. Because if you don't even have to win the Big 12 again. I think that a lot of fans are like, oh, if we don't win the Big 12, then this season's been a failure. I don't agree with that. I think that this year, for me, you need to be in a position where you can win 10 games. And what I mean by that is if you go 10-2 or better in the regular season, awesome. Like honest, like you go whatever 12-0, that's incredible. Then you're in the playoff no matter what. You go 11-1, you're probably in the playoff no matter what. You go 10-2, who knows? There's all sorts of possibilities. Big 12 tiebreakers, depends who those losses come to. But if you go 10-2 and let's just say you don't even make the Big 12 championship game, that's still a really good spot for the program because then it's back-to-back 10-win regular seasons. And you don't look at that season and be like, oh, we didn't take advantage of what we had. It's like, yeah, we maybe could have been a little bit better in that season, but you still went 10-2. 9-3, it would be I wouldn't be very happy with a 9-3 season, but there's still a chance you make the Big 12 championship game. And if you go 9-3, you'll almost certainly be ranked, which is a step. Like ASU finishing the end of the season ranked is a good season, and maybe it would feel a little underwhelming, but at least it would be similar to the 2014 season. And again, like that year, you had the opportunity to win 10 games in that Sun Bowl. And if ASU goes 9-3, they'll probably play in the Alamo Bowl or the Pop-Tarts Bowl, in which case you would be playing against another ranked team. So you would have the opportunity to end the year on a high note with a legitimate win to get to 10 wins. So I think all of those, and I think those are pretty light. Like the win total is 8.5. And I think that getting to 9 wins, that doesn't seem like a huge task, right? I think if you get to 9 wins, then you can also absorb a dumb loss in that stretch. The second to last regular season game at Colorado scares the bejesus out of me, not because I think Colorado's a better team than ASU, because it's just a weird spot. At Mississippi State scares me. The game hosting Houston scares me. I think Houston's going to be an upstart team in the Big 12 this year. But anyway, I would say those would be meeting expectations. Anything below that, 8-4, 7-5, it's not going to be. It's going to be remembered as a what if year, and that could really set the program. I don't want to say set the program back, but it would really stall the momentum, because it's one thing that, like, if the national media thinks like, oh, like ASU, like, they're a good program, but they're not going to be able to sustain it year over year. That's one thing. If the casuals in your fan base think that, that's really troubling, because then in the following years, or at least in 26, it'll be harder to get the stadium full. You could have some trouble raising NIL. Now, who knows what NIL is even going to look like then? So that's a whole nother thing. Side note, like, I'm not going to be touching too much on the executive order signed by Trump about like saving college sports, because who even knows if it's going to go into effect, how enforceable it's going to be. So like, it's noteworthy in that it happened, but I just, until stuff really sets into place, it's kind of irrelevant to me. So anyway, that's a separate topic. But I guess my point is, like, take advantage of the opportunity that is ahead of you. Now, this schedule is, I don't know. It's not easy, but it's also not incredibly difficult either. So let me share my screen. Here we go. So this is on FBS schedules, starting out with TCU. So like, you got to get through this little four. Okay, so the non-con I think is pretty self-explanatory. Like, you got to go 3-0 in non-con. Going on the road and losing to Mississippi State would pop a balloon in the momentum of this year so much. That game is going to be difficult. I think it's kind of good that they're an SEC team because it will get ASU's full attention, and I also think it's kind of good that this Mississippi State team almost beat ASU last year. Now, did they really almost beat ASU? No, I don't think they're like, I don't really think that game was ever truly in question. But in terms of the scoreboard, it was a one-score game, and it didn't always feel super comfortable at points in the fourth quarter. So it wasn't a blowout, and I think that'll have ASU's attention. I mean, if you're Sam Levitt, he played badly in that game last year. Hosting Texas State, I think I'm glad that game's at home. Let me put it that way, because I think Texas State's going to be pretty good again. But I also they lost a ton of players, and ASU should be able to beat them at home. Maybe it won't be the prettiest win, but then you get to this 4-game stretch. If you obviously going 1-3 in this stretch would be horrible. I think you got to go. For me to feel really good about this year, if you go 3-1 in this stretch, that means that you're just clearly better than most of these teams, and it really sets you up because then you're 7 games. That means you're 6-1 with 2 road games remaining. Only one of those teams that you're playing is considered to be good before the year, and you'll establish yourself as a really good high-level program, even if it's like at losing to Texas Tech or something. But that should be the goal. The goal should be to enter the Houston game at 6-1. 5-2 you can get away with, but then you have very little wiggle room at the end of the year. So I'm not going to go through the rest of the schedule, but I think the schedule is solid, but also it's not like a meat grinder, but it's also not a complete cakewalk either. And that's good. I think that's a good place to be for this program with the players it has and all that. So things are on the table for you, right? And I watched a good little bit of the interviews from the Sun Devil. I don't know if it was, they had a media day earlier this week, and most of the quotes coming out of there were pretty general and pretty expected. I think if you follow this team on a basically day-to-day basis, like, you're hearing a lot of the same themes. Like, Jaron Hamilton had a quote that like Kenny Dillingham has a much different coaching style than Nick Saban. It's like, yeah, I mean, he's like half his age, and different. They're not Alabama. It's like, but I mean, it's still noteworthy, I guess. And interesting that Javen Robinson said he was going to ice the game to Dillingham before he picked off Retzlaff against BYU. Of course, it didn't actually technically ice the game because we decided to go big brain there at the end of the second half, but that's a different discussion. Justin Watley mentioned how ASU could become a blue blood. I don't love those quotes. I don't know. He's not totally wrong, but like, just focus on this year, and I think he is. So there's that. And the only real thing that stuck out to me was Keyshawn Elliott mentioning that around 95% of the team would go to voluntary team workouts at 8 a.m. on Saturdays, which that's impressive. And that Jordan Tyson is like one of those guys who's just like always at the facility, which you love to see. And it pops when you watch his game. Like, I mean, I'm not going to give you the detailed film breakdown of Jordan Tyson, but he's an awesome player. And like he's a big reason why I'm like, this season is very important, because like, even though ASU can kind of get wide receivers pretty seamlessly through recruiting or just whatever, like, you still want to take advantage of when you have Jordan Tyson on your team, because he just does so many things well. And he's such a winning player too. But I mean, having 95% of guys at voluntary team workouts at 8 a.m. on a Saturday, like, That is, it shows that this team is very connected and they are putting in the work to improve from last year. And based on the quotes, it doesn't seem like they're just satisfied with like, oh, like we won 10 games last year and all that. I think I heard Levitt at Media Day mention like we were in some close games, so we need to play better in that. So like I don't think there's a air of complacency, but that doesn't mean they're just gonna be better, right? Like so, uh, yeah, it just comes into focus that like when you have the linebacker core that ASU have, when you have the secondary that ASU has, with Keith Abney getting NFL buzz, Xavier Alford is widely recognized as one of the better safeties in college football. Rouser, an incredible player. 4 or 5 offensive linemen return. You have, and I've mentioned like just a really good offense with talented players. You want to take advantage of it, you know, and there's a part of me that like what if it all comes together, you know? What if it all comes together? What if Levitt is plays exactly like second half of the year, Sam Levitt? What if Jordan Tyson just picks up right where he left off? What if the running back group just kind of fills in Scadaboo's role kind of seamlessly, right? I mean, no, it's been said a billion times this offseason, but like no one player will be Scadaboo, but Kyson Brown looked pretty good at the end of last year. Rayleigh Brown has all of the freaking blue chip potential in the world, and practice clips have shown that. Kanye Udo, productive player last year. You have the tight ends, and this is something that like I'm very excited to see how ASU deploys its tight ends this year because you have Mateer, who we already know is good and just a good, solid tight end, versatile. Cameron Harpole, just a really good blocking guy and someone who I think can contribute. The way people have talked about Kamari Anderson from Kentucky is encouraging. And then AJ Ia, I mean, the clips that have come out in spring ball were just incredible. And so this guy is like way better than your average freshman tight end, it looks like. So I'm just really excited to see how that develops, especially when, we look at the wide receivers and obviously Tyson is incredible. After him, we look at Jalen Moss and we look at Jaron Hamilton and we say, okay, those guys will be able to step right in as the second and third wideouts, throwing in Malik McClain in there. But there's questions with all of them, right? Let's start with McClain. Like, he hasn't really caught on in a college football program for his entire time. Maybe it all comes together this year, but we don't know, right? Jaron Hamilton, he had a good spring camp. We don't know how good it'll translate onto the field, right? We don't know. We've seen that before. And then Jalen Moss is more of I'd say, known quantity, but he had good production his 2 years at Fresno State. And I keep coming back to the game he had at Michigan last year where I think he had like 97 yards receiving. But he was, it's not like he's the next coming of Devontae Adams at Fresno State, right? He was just a good player. So, like, we'll see how much he impacts this year. And then you have some guys like Eusebio, maybe a Corey Butler steps up. Who knows? So tying that back to maybe the tight ends, we just have 3 tight ends on the field a lot more often. And that can be a huge challenge for the defense as well. So it'll be interesting to see how that all comes together with Arroyo and Levitt, what they prefer. And then the offensive line, like, I think that the right side of the offensive line is like in really good shape with Ian Achor and Kyle Scott. And then left tackle is still kind of it's probably going to be Josh Atkins. And I saw that he lost like 20 pounds this offseason. It's not like he was a good left tackle, but he wasn't like incredibly good. So there's that. Everyone kind of expects Ben Coleman to just seamlessly fit in at center. That'll be a theme to watch at fall camp is how are the quarterback center exchange going. So there's that. And then the defense, I obviously mentioned the back seven. The front seven, we know they're good at stopping the run, especially with CJ Fight and Kongaika, Zach Swanson filling in there. The edges are good. I think that, Dorba, Smith, and O'Neal are all good players, but the sack totals were not there last year. And I was watching the PFF college preview of Arizona State with Dalton Wasserman and Max Chadwick the other day. And overall, they had positive things to say about ASU. They weren't they took ASU to go over its 8.5 win total, and in a comfortable fashion, right? They weren't really totally that concerned about ASU going below. But the big weakness they highlighted on that show was ASU's pass rush from last year, which apparently, according to their metrics, was like the second or third worst in all of the Power Four. In terms of the sack totals, that's definitely true, and that was a huge emphasis in spring ball. And it seemed like they did well, according to reports. But the production, it didn't always add up on the field. Now, what PFF's metrics ranking it as like the second or third worst pass rush in the Power Four, that my eye test just doesn't really agree with that. I know that they definitely, I'm not saying they were average even, but that seems pretty low. So that could be a real hinge in this season. When you're playing a Sawyer Robertson, when you're playing Devin Dampier, when you're playing a Josh Hoover, a Rocco Becht, whoever's Colorado quarterback is, you can't just give them all this time in the world in the pocket, even though ASU has good defensive backs. It's, you got to get home to the quarterback and at least disrupt their timing. So that is a huge X factor this year. And it could probably be the difference in winning a game or two. And so I'm not too concerned about it because of how the rave reviews they drew at spring ball. Who knows how that'll translate, obviously. But and what also is true is Dorba had, I believe, 6 sacks in 2023. And granted, that was, it's a different scenario, worse team, probably. Well, they didn't have more opportunities to rush the passer because teams were ahead on them, and so they would lead. And just thinking this out now, and they would run the ball. So I think Dorba is really the guy. Like, if you're looking for a guy to get to like 8 sacks, I think it might be Dorba, and I think you kind of saw that from Clayton Smith too. So I bring those guys up, and Elijah O'Neal as well, who I believe he's in the 5th year, right? Like, these guys have the capability to disrupt passing plays on a better clip than they did last year. And I mean, Dorba and Smith were both really high-level recruits, and we've seen flashes from them. So I really think those guys are important. I didn't mention Jesus Gomez. I think that everyone's looking at it like, we will just be better at kicker. And I think that's true. We will be better at kicker, but we can't just expect him to make every single field goal, So I don't think Dillingham and Arroyo are going to just be like, it's 4th and 2 at the 20-yard line. Let's kick the field goal because we have a good field goal kicker. Now, I don't think that's going to be their mindset, but it's something to watch, that he's just not going to be perfect, But that's it. I mean, it's still in a much better position than it was before. So just kind of talking some things out, and just like, this is just a big year for ASU football, because let's just say they go 10-2 in the regular season. You keep all the momentum with the fan base, because if you go 10-2, then that means you probably go undefeated at home, or you have 1 home loss, and that's fantastic. And it just keeps all the positive momentum, and it keeps kind of the same old ASU allegations off to the side. It would establish you as a clear top tier team in the Big 12 which would be very important. Obviously, the Big 12, there's some weirdness, and some analysts call it like a random number generator conference, and I don't totally believe that. I think there are tiers to teams in the Big 12, but it's been 1 year, and ASU was projected to be last and finished first last year. Now, I've said it a million times on the show, like ASU never should have been projected to be last. Clearly, their talent is much better than people thought, and we're seeing it this year. So anyway, that's enough on that. And then it would better you in, today, right? Like North Carolina, there's news that they're planning to leave the ACC. Now, who knows how quickly that'll go and all that, but having another season where let's say you finish ranked in the top 15, you are at the very least in the mix for the Big 12 championship race at the end of the year. That continues to build your brand as a football program, keeps you on the map, and keeps you in good shape for potential reshuffling of conference chairs, not shares, although bigger shares in the Big Ten or whatever, right? Conference chairs in the 2030 range, therefore giving you a better potential chance to join the Big Ten or join the SEC or join the Super Conference, as it were. So, I just think if ASU goes if they go 8-4 and somehow finish ranked, or if there's a weird scenario where they still make the Big 12 championship game at 8-4, okay, fine. I don't think that either of those are likely if they go 8-4. So that's why I kind of put 8-4 as like it's not good enough for this year. If they go 8-4 in 2026, if Jake Fetty's starting a quarterback, or who knows, Dante Moore doesn't play well at Oregon and he transfers to ASU and they go 8-4, that's fine. But this team, the singular group that they have this year, should do better than go 8-4 or worse, right? And there's a part of me that doesn't really like saying that out loud because they go get jinxed, But then I look at okay, we have Sam Leavitt, who it's not just that he's a good quarterback, it's that this guy is so difficult to take down in the backfield. And that's such a winning play. Having watched Russell Wilson for years growing up, he kept games alive for the Seahawks by avoiding pressure in the backfield. And maybe he just ran for 4 yards to get the first down, but that some of those plays are backbreaking for the defense. And that's what Sam Leavitt did last year. If you look at the game against Kansas, there's just a lot of instances where his playmaking with his legs just kept ASU drives going. I mean, we saw that in the college football playoff against Texas. For him to only get sacked once in that game is outstanding. And he has the competitive fire to just keep improving. So you don't want to waste this year with Leavitt and Tyson and the returning starters. You just don't want to do it. So I'm kind of maybe looking at that from a negative perspective, but then I'll close out this kind of segment saying it can all come together. It can all come together. This is the first time in my life as an ASU fan where the opportunity of them going 11-1 or potentially even 12-0 in the regular season is on the table. It really is. Because I think this defense is going to really give them a shot to win a few games that maybe they don't totally deserve to win type of deal, where I guess that's a wrong way to put it. It has the opportunity to bail their offense out in a few games. And I think their offense is good enough that it has the opportunity to bail out the defense in certain games. Because you're not just going to, while ASU has the talent and the experience and the coaching to win some of these games by double digits and pull away from teams, that's not how it's going to work on a game-to-game basis, right? So those units can really help them potentially win some closer games. And it's just the completeness of the team, right? you only lose Scatterboo, and that is that's a real loss, right? Especially, I mean, that game against Texas, like he won the Peach Bowl MVP in a losing effort, right? Like, but I just with growth of all the other players and the strong running back room, I think that it will be his loss will be overcome. So, yeah, I just kind of wanted to talk about just this is an important year for ASU, and it could go a lot of different ways. But while I started this out by saying like they need to do this to be, they need to go 9-3 or better for this to be a success. They could easily go 11-1, and maybe they go 11-1 and win the Big 12, and that puts them at like the 3 seed in the college football playoff. Like they could really set themselves up for a better path in the college football playoff. So I'll dive into it more as the camp goes along, and I'm going to try to have some guests on in August. But I just, as kind of the off season wraps up, I did my spiel on the 1975 team that should claim the 1975 championship. We've talked about all this stuff, and it just kind of culminates in, hey, like this is a big year. And one of the reasons that the 2021 team doesn't age well is because you look at all the talent that team had, and they go 8-4 in that year, in that schedule that they had in 2021. You can say 8-4 is better than average for your standard ASU football season, but that year they had the schedule and the talent to do better than that. And that same principle applies to the 2025 season. So there's a lot on the line, but I think Dillingham likes it that way. And I think while the pressure is there, the expectations are there, the continuity is there, the talent is there, the depth is there, and the experience is there, and the quarterback play is there. So I love it, and I'm just excited to watch this year. It's hopefully there's not too many injuries at camp. We kind of saw that this in 2024, even like the ASU defense got a lot better once Jordan Crook and Prince Dorba got rested up from their injuries and contributed in the second half of the year. So yeah, important year for ASU football coming up for me to keep running on that topic. All right. I mentioned earlier that North Carolina, I'm recording this on Thursday, the 24th of July. I mentioned that North Carolina news came out that they're looking to leave the ACC to go to the SEC. Not super surprising, but I think it's notable that it's just come out as news. There's a few kind of ways I want to go with it, but I want to relate it back to some news that came out earlier this week. Okay. So I have a tweet from Chris Vanini, and I'm going to share it on the YouTube page. Just some weird conference realignment news, or almost conference realignment news, is that the Memphis Tigers decided to try to get into the Big 12. And this is from Chris Vanini of The Athletic. Pete Thamel of ESPN reported on this too. They proposed to take no money and provide upwards of $200 million in sponsorships with Memphis companies like FedEx and Lowe's, and the Big 12 still rejected them. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. First off, I want to say, like, this really, like, if you're a Memphis fan, this is terrible news. I can relate to this kind of because I've listened to a few Memphis shows, media members, and I didn't know how long like their quest has been to try to get into a power conference. All sorts of reasons why they haven't. They almost got in the Big 12 in the mid 2010s. They haven't been able to get into the ACC, and they're still trying to get in the Big 12 again. They've seen UCF, Cincinnati, Houston leave the American Conference from them and join the Big 12 while they get left behind in the American. And they want to get in the Big 12. To drop $200 million as an offer, to have, they have a successful basketball program, and I believe they finished in the top 25 in football last year. Like, they've been, over the last 10 years, they've been a good football program. To have those things in their back pocket and not get in is just really difficult for them. And if you're a Memphis fan watching this, like, this sucks. Like, this sucks. And I don't really have any encouraging words, but it's just, this is a crappy thing to happen because the goalposts keep moving, the criteria keeps changing, and you up your game and it still isn't enough. And the reason why I can relate to this is being I'm from the Seattle area. I grew up in Tacoma, Washington. I was in summer after 6th grade when the Seattle Sonics left for Oklahoma City. So I've spent, at this point, over half of my life not having an NBA team to root for from my hometown. Just seeing the Thunder win a freaking championship. They are a well-run all that. And in the meantime, Seattle is a top 13 market in all of America. They now have an arena that's new. They have a basketball culture, and the NBA is like, oh no, we're not going to expand. We're focusing on NBA Europe. We, maybe Mexico City is the new team, or we don't want to. We don't want to cut up the pie even more because we want to keep our large media shares. And the ball just keeps getting kicked down of, we're going to expand eventually. We're going to do this. And now it has me like fiending for the Pelicans to move out of New Orleans. And I don't really I'd rather just get an expansion team. But when you keep delaying it, you gotta look at every option. And so stealing a team from a different city doesn't apply to Memphis in this case, but the fact that they keep trying, they keep upping their game, they keep growing as an impressive sports entity, and they just keep getting rejected. Like, I really do empathize with that. With that said, I do not think I agree with the Big 12 for not letting them in. Few reasons why. I mentioned this in a tweet, quote tweet of the Vanini Post. So here's my tweet that I wrote out. Memphis does provide some intrigue, but I feel like the Big 12 is stretched thin as it is. The 3 other American Conference teams have needed time to adjust to this level, so adding one more doesn't make sense, especially if Yormark thinks he can nab a few ACC schools. I'll go back to the ACC point in a minute. UCF, Cincinnati, and Houston not doing well in Big 12 football undoubtedly has hurt Memphis in their quest to join the Big 12. And it's just horrible timing for Memphis. I mean, I think of those 3 schools, they've been in the Big 12 for 2 seasons, so 6 combined seasons for all of them. The best is UCF going 6-6 one year. That's not good enough. Like, you can't, if you're the Big 12, you can't keep adding lesser tier teams. It's just going to hurt your brand. It's also lessening the media share that goes out. Oh, no, that's not true because Memphis is offering to take 0 money. So negate that last point. But it just dilutes the overall football product, or at least it would on paper. Who knows? Maybe Memphis would come in and have no issue. But the precedent is UCF, Cincinnati, and Houston have had huge issues adjusting to the Big 12. And if you're the Big 12 already, you are fighting an uphill battle against the Big 10, the SEC, and the current version of the ACC that has 3 powers in the 2 Florida schools in Clemson that recruit at a high level. So you can't add another reason for people to be like, oh, that's just a glorified G5 conference. You can't do that. And so it's just bad timing for Memphis. Maybe they can be a benefactor of the ACC potentially falling apart. But as it all stacks up, I agree with the Big 12 not letting them in. It didn't even seem like it was a big, much of a debate. I believe one of the presidents was anonymously quoted saying, like, why would we add them now when we didn't add them before? I mean, things have changed a little bit with their huge offer, but and $200 million, like, that sounds great, but that also is like, that gets chopped up, and that also is spread out over, whatever, like 5 years. So it's not as much money as it seems at first. And it's just a tough go of it for Memphis. So they're probably going to end up in the Pac-12 now, which, as a football fan, just as a neutral college football fan, I really would be excited to watch Memphis in the Pac-12, because then you go Memphis, Oregon State, Washington State, Boise State, Fresno. Oh, who's another? San Diego State has been good, but like, that's a lot of pretty good teams playing one another. That does establish you clearly as the 5th best conference for them. And I think it would still be able to give Memphis a potential building block to move to, whatever future great conferences that happens in the next era of college football. So, so to wrap up my thoughts on this, like, it's a really tough break for Memphis, but at the same time, I do not disagree with the Big 12 not letting them in. I think you got to keep some chairs warm for ACC schools. I have talked about earlier in the show that North Carolina is planning to leave. We know that other schools in the past have tried to leave the ACC, Florida State being the most notable. Clemson's been in the mix. And this really provides a lot of opportunities for the Big 12, at least in the nearish term. So it seems like if North Carolina goes to the SEC, then I imagine Virginia will as well. And even though those are North Carolina is a mid-tier football school, Virginia is clearly like a below-average football school, not undoubtedly. But it gets new markets for the SEC. And if you're the SEC, maybe if you're if you're like Auburn, are you like, do we really want to add Florida State and Clemson? Like, it's starting to get hard enough in this league as it is. Let's add 2 teams that are clearly would be on the bottom end. And I actually think that's smart for the SEC. I think one of the issues it might face in these next few years is that these teams beat up on each other, right? Like, Alabama didn't get into the playoff last year because they lost at Oklahoma. And you can say, oh, well, Oklahoma, they were bad, and it's true that they were bad, but it's still like still Oklahoma, right? And what I mean by that is they have the talent on a year-over-year basis. And I'm not saying they were a good team last year, but it's still a tough road environment. Anyway, those things don't exist as much with North Carolina and Virginia going to the SEC, if that happens. So this opens the door for a few things for the Big 12. The obvious candidates to join from the ACC are Louisville, NC State. Those are the big two. Those are the 2 that keep kind of getting brought up, because Louisville almost joined the Big 12 back like 15 years ago. NC State, there's an ASU vibe to them in a certain way that, like, they have a decent bit to offer. There's a lot of meat left on the bone, and they just kind of feel like a Big 12 school. Virginia Tech, I think, would be a good Big 12 addition. And then I don't know what you do with some of these more academically inclined schools, like a Georgia Tech, a Duke. Virginia. Who knows? I don't know what if it's only 4 schools, maybe you add a Pitt. I think Pitt would fit in the Big 12, especially with West Virginia and Cincinnati right there. But those schools have kind of been bandied about already. And I think they would just kind of add to the solidness of the Big 12, but none of those schools, I think like Louisville, NC State, Virginia Tech, Pitt, those are all schools kind of in the ASU bin of programs where like you're not surprised if they have a good little run, but you're also not surprised if they go 7-5, you know? So kind of just in that mid-tier bin of college football programs. Where this becomes interesting is if Florida State, Clemson, and Miami find that they don't have a place to go in the Big Two. All three of those schools would love to one day wind up in the Big Ten or SEC. If you're Miami, you probably would prefer the Big Ten because that's just kind of the vibe of their school. If you're Clemson, you probably prefer the SEC. If you're Florida State, it seems like you would go either way. But there is no for sure outcome that any of those schools gets into the Big Two. And in fact, maybe it's just two of the three, right? Like maybe Clemson and FSU do and Miami doesn't. Or maybe Miami does and Clemson does, but Florida State doesn't. Or whatever combination it may be. The Big 12 needs to do everything in its power to be the landing spot for at least one of those programs. And maybe they all go to the top two and it all falls apart and whatever. But like, if the Big 12 stays alive for this next version of college football, if it could grab even one of FSU, Clemson, or Miami, that would be fantastic. It would be absolutely fantastic for the Big 12 because, there's all this conversation of, could one of these schools kind of grow into being the power of the conference? And there's different schools that have different benefits, right? Like Texas Tech has the money cannon, right? BYU has a money cannon and an international fan base, but they also have the honor code, and that's going to a good chunk of college football players just aren't going to deal with that. ASU has huge alumni, a good coach, a decent enough history, and who knows, maybe it all comes together and ASU becomes the alpha of the Big 12. Kansas State and Utah are kind of in that bin too. It's like they've just been good programs. There's like 5 teams that have a case that can be made that like, okay, you can be the blue blood. If you had Miami, if you had Florida State, if you had Clemson, one of those, two of those, all three of those, then you have at least one more school that is proven that it can be a power in college football. And so I just look at the fact that there's 3 teams like that. And we know that North Carolina is already going, well, we don't know, but we can see that North Carolina is going to end up in the SEC. And some of these other ACC schools, like Georgia Tech, could go to the Big Ten. And while Georgia Tech is not a blue blood or anything like that, it's in Georgia, huge state, huge market, all that. And it's in a state where the Big Ten is not active. So the Big Ten could add Georgia Tech. They could add, I mentioned Virginia. Maybe the Big Ten adds Duke. I don't know what's going to, Duke is a weird, I don't know what's going to happen with Duke and all this. So Duke is in a weird spot, but they could get nabbed up. And so what I'm saying by mentioning Georgia Tech and Duke and Virginia is to say, while those schools don't have the football bona fides as Clemson, FSU, and Miami, they do have other tangible things that a SEC or a Big Ten might want, as evidenced by these recent news coming out about North Carolina. And my point is that if those 2 conferences don't take one or all 3 or 2 of the 3 of Clemson, FSU, and Miami, the Big 12 needs to be there to take them in as their fallback option, right? That's what it would be. I mean, none of these. If you're an FSU fan, you're not like, oh, let's go to the Big 12. Like, no, I'm not deluded. I'm not blind to that. But it is on the table. I would say, I don't know. I can't even predict. I have no idea what's going to happen with all this. They could all three go, and if it's a super conference, then the point is moot, and who knows. But something to keep an eye on, especially over. I mean, the season's starting up, but who knows? Maybe over the next 2 weeks we'll find out more about this, because it seems clear that the ACC grant of rights isn't as strong as it once was, or there's loopholes around it, or whatever it may be. So something the Big 12 needs to keep an eye on. I know that I've said in my playoff format criticism of the Big 12 wanting the 5+11, in that, like, as an ASU fan, I don't really care about how this affects the Big 12. I want it to affect ASU, because I want ASU to move up. Who knows if that's even possible? And it becomes ASU moving up becomes less relevant if they add some of those three powers from the ACC, and then all of a sudden the Big 12 becomes more legitimized. And maybe it's not on the level of like the Big 10 or the SEC, but it closes the gap, and I think that's good enough, right? So that's something to watch for. I don't have any inside sourcing on this at all. It feels unlikely that if this next round of realignment is the SEC and the Big 10, and it's not a Super League scenario. Again, it's an if already. If it's the two big conferences and the Big 12 and the ACC falls apart, it just feels unlikely to me that all three of Clemson, Florida State, and Miami will find spots at those Big Two conferences, because you have other teams like Georgia Tech and Virginia and North Carolina potentially clogging up those spots. So that leaves the opportunity for the Big 12 to potentially kind of come in through the back door and grab the best remaining ACC team. So we already know, like, it's that the NC State and Louisville, those level of schools are probably going to the Big 12 no matter what, if the ACC falls apart. If Brett Yormark can grab one of those powers, then all of the kind of criticism I've had of him, or I think this guy's brand is a little bit better than his actual actions, that'll go to the side. If you get Miami, you get one of those schools, I'm in. Then the Big 12 becomes so much more viable of a conference, even if that program isn't even that good at that time. And that's just kind of the cruel world of college football. But those schools would increase the brand. They would be the biggest ratings thing already. If it's Florida State, they would absolutely have the largest fan base of any Big 12 school, probably Clemson as well. So we'll see how that plays out. But I just thought I would tie it all with the Memphis news and the North Carolina news today. It seems like there's some moving chairs in the adjacent to the Big 12. So that's the episode for today. Thank you for watching and listening. I'll try to get to a more regular schedule in August. I don't know, kind of just been in a funk recently, just job hunting. And if anyone's looking for a job right now, man, it's rough out there. It's not a fun experience, and it just kind of got me in a haze a little bit. So I've just been kind of lackadaisical with recording. I'm glad I was able to do it today. And, sometimes my procrastination actually helps me out, because if I'd recorded this on Wednesday, then the North Carolina news wouldn't be here. If I'd recorded last week, then the Memphis news wouldn't have popped up. So, yeah, keep an eye on more realignment moves. And, in the near term, like, I think as ASU fans, we all know this, but like, there's a lot on the line this season for Sun Devil football. And I think they have the talent, and all the things on paper look good, but we got to see how it plays out. And maybe it plays out better than anyone thinks it will. Who knows what the high end potential is for this team too. That's something that's something that you can really hold on to as hope entering this year. So anyway, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe on YouTube, rate and review on your podcast platform of choice. And as always, go Sun Devils.